Now, let me tell you something that nobody hates to confess. The act of a man asking you to move in with him is essentially a declaration that he is prepared to be manipulated. When Donovan offered me to move into his apartment a month ago, I believe that was the first thing that came to my mind. What I mean is that we had been together for 8 months. And to tell you the truth, I was getting tired of the whole routine that he had going on, which consisted of being respectful and taking things slowly. Taking up residence seemed like the ideal opportunity for me to test the limits of what I could truly get away with. Since we had been together for a few weeks, I had been testing tiny boundaries by showing up without prior notice, leaving my belongings everywhere, and making comments about how he preferred to spend his free time. The gaming stuff in particular was a source of irritation for me. On the other hand, I am right there, and he is starring at some ridiculous screen shooting. Fake people or whatever else he is doing. I can honestly say that the week I moved in was great. He was so anxious to make me feel at ease that he inquired about my preferences regarding dinner, where I wanted my belongings to be stored, and whether I required anything. I found it to be pleasant, but also weak. Perhaps I was anticipating a more difficult challenge, but I don't know. My ex-boyfriend Tristan would never have been willing to be so accommodating. It was the fact that he had this edge that kept me interested in him. However, what about Donovan? To put it simply, he was very. On a consistent basis, I'm asked about how my day went, and I'm always eager to discuss my emotions and future intentions. I could see that the landlord was quite pleased with me when we went to meet with him to discuss adding me to the lease. It was almost as if he was trying to show me off or something. I could tell that the landlord was one of those older males who presumably believed that women should be grateful for whatever they get, despite the fact that he'd given off the impression of being kind enough. That evening, I began to have feelings of tension. This was the circumstance I found myself in. I was virtually trapped in a home setting with someone who treated me as if I were made of glass. Part of me questioned whether or not I had made a mistake. Just the week before, Tristan had sent me a text message asking if I would want to go out and get some drinks, but I had ignored it. But what about now? Perhaps it would have been better for me to not discard it so quickly. It's a well-known fact that I've always been attracted to men who keep me guessing about them. It was impossible to not anticipate what Donovan would do. In every situation. I was completely aware of what he was going to say and how he was going to respond. Why was there so much excitement? When did the pursuit begin? Once I reached the age of 21, I began to question whether or not this whole stable relationship thing was really what I wanted, or whether or not I was just settling for it because everyone told me that it was what I should want. When I thought about all that Donovan did, I couldn't help but compare it to what Tristan would have done. Even though Donovan was the one who made me coffee in the morning, I couldn't help but think of how Tristan would surprise me with my favorite energy drinks. For example, when Donovan inquired about my day at work, I would recall how Tristan never bothered to engage in idle chatter. Instead, he would simply grab me and kiss me as soon as I stepped through the door. Being in the company of someone who did not require verbal processing of everything was intoxicating for a number of reasons. After giving it some more thinking, I came to the conclusion that I had been missing the intensity. The stakes were extremely high while dealing with Tristan. I was never in a position where I had to question whether or not he wanted me, and our fights were intense, and our makeup sessions were fantastic. The way he would become possessive when we were out together, and the way he would get jealous when other guys stared at me were both clear indications of this. It was written all over his face. Donovan, on the other hand, behaved toward me as if we were housemates who occasionally engaged in sexual activity. He would ask for permission before changing the channel, apologize for breathing too loudly when I was trying to read, and truly thank me for doing simple girlfriend things like picking up dinner. He would have done all of these things several times. Being in the company of someone who continually expressed gratitude was a draining experience. I embarked on a series of tentative tests with him. In order to hear what he had to say, I would leave the dishes in the sink for a while. In the absence of his request, I would use his pricey face wash. At the very last minute, I would make a change to the plans and observe his response. He would simply adjust his behavior, grin, and assure me that everything was okay. Where was the skeleton behind it? Where was the man who would show me that he had boundaries and tell me that he would not back down? This is the actual event that took place that evening. The reason I am being absolutely honest is because nobody is going to hear what I have to say anyhow. No, I did not switch off his television by accident. Due to the fact that I was weary of being ignored, I went over and hit the button that operated the electricity. He had been playing that ridiculous game for 2 hours, and I had been sitting. They're trying to attract his attention by making comments and asking questions. However, he just kept responding, and yeah, babe, without even looking at me. I was frustrated. That's right, I put an end to it. When he looked at me with that puppy dog expression of confusion and asked, "Really, babe?" Then I knew he was serious. I was unable to recover. It was not because I was exhausted. It was a load of bullshit. Rather, I was putting him to the test. I was curious to see whether he would finally show some resilience, become a little angry, and possibly grab me and kiss me or something like that. Instead, he did nothing but sit there looking distressed. I walked off to the bedroom at that moment because, to tell you the truth, his response was pitiful. While I was thinking about it, I was imagining how Tristan would have responded to the situation. It would have been either that he would have laughed and dragged me onto his lap, or that he would have become genuinely angry. And then we would have engaged in one of those furious bouts that resulted in great make-up sex. However, what about Donovan? Simply put, he appeared to be depressed. When he came to talk to me, I maintained the attitude throughout our conversation because a part of me wanted to push him even further. I could not wait to witness his breaking point, but he maintained his composure and continued to attempt to reason with me, which just served to make me more irate. Just where was the enthusiasm? The fire was located where? At the time, I had moved in with someone who handled disagreements as if they were business meetings. I was becoming increasingly irritated throughout the entirety of his conversation, which was delivered in a gentle and compassionate tone. "I can see you're upset, and I need your assistance in understanding what's really bothering you," he continued saying over and over again. When I was in therapy with someone who had no emotional commitment in the outcome, it was like being in therapy with myself. I desired for him to have the same level of energy that I did, to become as excited as I was, and to demonstrate to me that the actions I took had an effect on him. Rather than that, he sat on the edge of the bed with his hands folded, looking at me as if I were a riddle that he needed to solve. That is not to say that I was his girlfriend, whom he was meant to be completely obsessed with. It was not as if I was someone who was worth contending for, similar to how I was an issue that needed to be managed. Consequently, I decided to say the thing about not signing the lease when he finally went away and instructed me to let him know when I wanted to have a real chat with him. Have I been serious? No, not really. The only thing I was attempting to do was generate a reaction from him so that he would fight for me and demonstrate to me that he genuinely cared enough to get furious. On the other hand, when I look back, I believe that a portion of me did intend to do it. Everything about the situation seemed off. I am exerting a great deal of effort in order to catch the attention of someone who is meant to be completely obsessed with me. It was never necessary for me to implore Tristan to pay attention to me. During the time that he was with me, I was the only thing that I cared about. It's true that he had his shortcomings, but at least I never got the impression that I was invisible. It was the speed with which Donovan absorbed what I had to say that truly had an impact on me. Most males would have at least made an effort to dissuade me from doing it, would have inquired as to the reason I was having second thoughts, and would have brought to my attention all of the plans that we had made together. However, he just said yes, as if leaving me behind was not a huge issue. It's almost as if he had been anticipating it all along. The problem is that I had no idea that he would actually send a text message to the landlord. I must admit that I was taken aback when he did it. For a brief while, I was under the impression that he was finally displaying some feeling, some possessiveness. Subsequently, he instructed me to get my belongings, and I became aware that this was not a passionate fury. This was an unfeeling dismissal. I experienced a moment of panic at that point. In part, I was correct when I told him that I did not have a transport available to me. Despite the fact that I could have called an Uber, I wanted him to offer to drive me because I wanted him to demonstrate that he was concerned about my being instead. He just stated that it was not a problem for me. He had a really icy tone to his speech, which was actually rather frightening. In other words, I used my trump card. My response was that I would phone Tristan to come and collect me. In the time that had passed since I had moved in with Donovan, Tristan had been sending me texts on and off, and I had been responding to them more frequently than I probably ought to have. It's nothing serious. It's just a little flirting here and there, but it helps keep that door open. I was under the impression that bringing him up would make Donovan possessive and jealous, possibly even a little bit insane. Instead, he allowed me 10 minutes to pack before asking the police to come and get me. Wait 10 minutes. This caused me to laugh out loud since I believed he was trying to bluff. It turned out to be the same individual who expressed regret for consuming the rest of the milk without first consulting myself. In the event that he had a disagreement with someone, there was no way that he would actually engage the police. Then, however, I became aware that he was being serious when I heard him talking on the phone outside. I was impressed in a certain way. A definitive action has finally been taken. I was, however, primarily enraged. He had the audacity to treat me like a random person he was evicting rather than his girlfriend, who was obviously just going through an emotional moment that everything about it seemed utterly unreal. When I was attempting to salvage our relationship, by showing him what he could lose, he was phoning the authorities as if I were some kind of threat. I was trying to save our relationship. As a result, I found myself questioning whether or not I had really truly known him at all, or whether or not this calm and empathetic guy had been an act the entire time. It was the speed with which he went. From attempting to have a sensible talk to utterly cutting me off that really screwed with my head. There was no opportunity for compromise with him. The only two options were therapy speak and the nuclear option. At the very least, when things became heated with Tristan, there was still desire behind everything that was going on. At this point, it seemed as though Donovan had completely disconnected himself from his feelings. After a few months had passed, I began to reflect on all of the instances in which I had the impression that he was withholding information from me. It felt as if he was concealing some aspect of himself from me. Perhaps he was actually this person all along, an individual who is capable of compartmentalizing to such an extent that within the period of an hour, he might go from making plans for the future with someone to calling the police on them. After giving it some more thinking, I felt more and more certain that he had been trying to find an excuse for his behavior. Could it be that he, too, had been experiencing uncertainties, but he was too much of a coward to bring them up directly? It is possible that all of that understanding and patient boyfriend act was nothing more than him going through the motions until he had a cause to terminate things. That would make him appear to be the compassionate one. It was a humiliating experience for me when the police finally arrived. Even though I am just 21 years old, I am being escorted out of the flat that I share with my boyfriend by the police as if I were some kind of criminal. The officers had a professional demeanor but were obviously irritated. They continued to inquire as to whether or not there had been any acts of violence or threats, and when we both said in the negative, I could see them rolling their eyes as if they had more important things to perform. It was the most upsetting aspect that Donovan remained so calm during the entire ordeal. There was no indication that he was upset, conflicted, or even angry. He appeared to be relieved. It seemed as though he was finally able to get rid of a problem that he had been struggling with. I was surprised by how much more painful that was. I attempted to explain that it was simply a misunderstanding, that my boyfriend overreacted to a tiny fight, but saying it out loud made me realize how it sounded. The officer asked me what occurred. While we were driving to my dad's house, I tried to explain that it was just a mistake, as if I were some kind of disturbed girl who was expelled after a week of being there. When the police car arrived into the driveway, my father was already up and waiting for it. When he saw me climbing out of the rear seat, the expression on his face was, I had never before felt like such a little person. The only thing he did was thank the officers and assist me with my belongings. He did not ask any questions. His eyes were filled with dissatisfaction, and I could see it. That evening, as I was resting in the bedroom I had used when I was a child, I sent Donovan a text message in which I attempted to explain that I had just said those things to upset him and that I didn't truly want to leave. When I exhibited some sensitivity, I believed that perhaps he would recognize that he had overreacted, and then we could find a way to work things out. As a result of the entire event, I felt as though I was going completely insane. The rapid escalation of the situation was a mystery. In the next moment, I was being led out of the room by law enforcement. In the previous moment, we were discussing our future together. The more I thought about it, the more certain I felt that he had been seeking for an excuse to get rid of me. It was illogical, and the more I thought about it, the more persuaded I grew. In my brain, I played over and over again the conversation that I had with the cops. When Donovan responded that there had been no other incidences, they looked at me as if I were some kind of time bomb that was about to explode. They had asked if this was a trend, whether there had been previous incidents, as if I were the kind of person who could go from being completely normal to completely insane without any prior warning signs. That, however, was not fair. For some weeks, I had been providing him with warning flags. The tiny tests, the stretching of boundaries, and the growing dissatisfaction with his passivity were all contributing factors. Could he not have been paying attention to any of it? Alternatively, had he simply been waiting for me to go too far in order to justify getting rid of me from his life? The fact that he had maintained his composure while communicating the issue to the authorities was the thing that disturbed me the most. He presented the information in a manner that was reminiscent of a book report. We had a disagreement after she moved in last week, during which she stated that she would not sign the lease. I urged her to leave, but she refused to leave. There was no expression of emotion, no acknowledgement that this was someone he had. apparently loved, and no acknowledgement that perhaps calling the police on your girlfriend can be considered a harsh response to a disagreement in a relationship. It was then that I began to wonder if he had been plotting this. If only he had seen that moving in together was a mistake, but he was at a loss for how to terminate things without appearing to be the one who did the wrong thing. If you want to get out of a relationship, what better way to do it than to have your girlfriend act in such a way that you have to call the authorities? Play silly games and win stupid rewards was his justification for his response. Yes, that was it. A sentence that was dismissive, such as, "I was some internet meme he was tired of seeing," was all that was said. There was no emotion or conversation. I spent the next few days anticipating that he would call, that he would miss me, and that he would admit that he had made a mistake. I was instead informed by our shared friends that he had already begun a relationship with another particular person. It would appear that he had struck up a conversation with a girl from his college who had recently relocated back to the area. It had been years since they had become friends, and now all of a sudden they are together. The impression I got was that he had been plotting this, as if he had been looking for a reason to get rid of me. Altogether, the saddest aspect was how fast everyone came around to his point of view. People who were friends with us acted as if I were the crazy ex-girlfriend who had been booted out of the house by the authorities. People were not interested in hearing my side of the tale. I was not asked how I was doing by anyone. All of them simply adopted his interpretation of the events, which stated that I was unstable and that he was the victim. When it came to the events that actually took place, even my own friends started questioning questions. Some of them suggested that I might have gotten away with it, stating that a man who phones the police on his girlfriend because of an argument is having problems. Others, however, appeared to believe that I must have committed a very heinous act in order to elicit such a reaction from them. I increased the amount of time I spent communicating with Tristan, and he was truly encouraging. It was his view that Donovan sounded like a control freak who was incapable of dealing with a lady who had opinions. The fact that relationships contain passion and conflict was something that Tristan was aware of. Not the sterile communication bullshit that therapists urge, but rather the fact that they are real is what makes them real. But as time went on, I sensed that I was becoming more and more alone. People were talking, and the story that was being widely disseminated was not the one that I would have mentioned. I was the problem, the dramatic girlfriend who couldn't handle a regular, healthy relationship according to everyone else. I was the problem. Almost as if they had all decided that I was guilty without even listening to my side of the story. It was the revelation that I learned about this new girl that really got to me. Apparently, it is Sarah. He had kicked me out of college, and she had just happened to move back to town shortly after that. They had been friends during their entire time in college. And if you ask me, it's just too handy. Over the course of the months that we were together, I began to piece together the comments that he had made. There are references to his undergraduate friends, as well as stories about people from his past. During the entire time that we were together, had he been on the phone with her? After conducting some research on social media, I discovered that there were, in fact, years of incidental interactions between the two of them. Comments on inside jokes, birthday greetings, and likes on postings are all examples of this. Nothing that was blatantly inappropriate, but enough to give the impression that they had maintained contact, to the point that I began to question whether or not I had been the girlfriend he had been using as a stand-in while he waited for her to become available. The lightning-fast pace at which they came together was a source of insult. Despite the fact that I had been dragged from his apartment by force, he was uploading images of himself with a new person less than 2 weeks later, not even making an effort to conceal it or show any regard for the date of the event, only going on as if our 8 months of being together had been of no consequence. In response to my confrontation with a few of our shared friends on the matter, they acted as if I was being unreasonable. To put it another way, I had no reason to be furious about the fact that my ex-boyfriend had started seeing someone he had known for years and had been friends with. Things like, you broke up, he can date whoever he wants, and perhaps you should focus on moving on instead of keeping track of what he's doing, were some of the things that they continuously said to you. In any case, that wasn't the goal. The point was that he had made me feel insane for wanting more passion, more intensity, and more emotional involvement from him, and then instantly found someone else to give all of that to. He had made me feel crazy. The idea was that perhaps I hadn't been asking for too much in the first place. It was possible that I had simply been questioning the incorrect person. After a period of 6 months, everything began to fall apart in ways that I had not anticipated. During that period, I had been living with my father, working a part-time job in retail that barely paid my expenditures, and mostly focusing on Reestablishing my social life, the fact that Tristan and I had been spending more time together, led me to believe that we might be moving closer to reuniting in a more formal capacity. He had been so supportive and sympathetic during the entire situation with Donovan, and he had been there for me whenever I needed someone to vent to. In addition to taking me out for drinks, allowing me to crash at his apartment when I could no longer tolerate being at my father's house, and genuinely listening to me when I complained about how unfairly I had been treated, he was a wonderful person. We had the impression that we could be able to have a genuine second chance, as if he had matured since the time that we had dated in the past. I then learned that he had been seeing another person the entire time, and not just in a casual manner, but in a serious manner. When they were on vacation together, the girl he had been dating for 3 months uploaded images of them together and referred to him as her boyfriend. My confrontation with him resulted in his laughing and stating that he believed I was aware that we were merely having fun. It would appear that all of those encouraging chats about what a loser Donovan was were simply his way of ensuring that I was always accessible as a backup position. After I called him out on it, he responded by saying, "Come on, Audrey. We never claimed to be exclusive in any way. It was your own business that you were dealing with. My alternatives were not completely closed off. I was under the impression that you were the same person. However, I was not. I had been focusing all of my efforts on reestablishing something with him, under the impression that we were making progress toward getting back together for good by doing so. Every single one of those evenings, I had choose to spend time with him rather than making an effort to meet new people. All those times when I had declined dates because I believed that we had something unique to offer one another. I had been playing the game in an entirely incorrect manner. Donovan and his new girlfriend were dining at a restaurant when I happened to run into them about the same time. She embodied everything that I did not. She was calm, kind, and appeared to be truly content. Simply by listening to him talk, what made the situation much more difficult was the way he seemed. Perhaps he was not easier to carry around. It seemed as though being with me had been a burden for him, and now he could finally breathe comfortably. They were without a doubt serious. While they were conversing quietly and laughing at jokes that were only known to them, I could see them holding hands across the table. She was wearing his jacket, in a way that ours had never been able to achieve. Everything about their contact appeared to be effortless. From the opposite side of the restaurant, I was able to observe them, and it was as if I was witnessing a completely different version of the guy I had dated. His smile was so broad that it touched his eyes, and he was lively and interested in the conversation. Over the course of our relationship, he always gave the impression that he was acting out the part of a boyfriend, going through the motions because that was what he was supposed to do. With her, he appeared to be ... I am content. One of the most frustrating aspects was observing how she reacted to him. She leaned in closer to him when he was speaking, laughed at his jokes, and stared at him as if he were the most intriguing person in the room that she was in. He was doing everything that I had been trying to encourage him to do for me, including being more engaged, more present, and more emotionally available, and he was doing it naturally with her. I had the want to go over there and inquire about what it was about her that made her so unique. What was it that she possessed that I did not? What was she handing him that I was unable to give him? On the other hand, I was aware that the response would most likely destroy me, so I escaped before they could see me. On the other hand, the true karma materialized when news spread about what had actually occurred on the night that he phoned the police. During the time that I was in a relationship with Donovan, information about my text with Tristan, in which I discussed how I had been keeping my ex as a backup plan, fell into the wrong hands. Suddenly, I was no longer the victim of an overreactive lover. Rather, I was the cheating girlfriend who got what she deserved. The news circulated across our social circle, and I found myself in the position of being the victim. Although I was never able to determine who was responsible for the leak, I did discover that someone had screenshots of my discussions with Tristan from the time when I was still with Donovan. There was nothing overtly sexual about it, yet it was flirtatious enough to be considered wrong. It was plenty to make it quite evident that I had been keeping him on the hook while simultaneously playing the role of a loyal girlfriend to Donovan. The text made me appear bad since I was complaining about Donovan being boring, making jokes about how much I missed the thrill I used to have with Tristan, and even making plans to meet up for drinks that I ended up canceling. After reading them again, I was able to imagine how they would appear to other people. It seemed as though I was using Donovan as a source of stability while having Tristan around for when I became bored. Everybody, even my father, started asking me probing questions about the patterns of my relationships. When I told my pals that they couldn't trust someone who played games like that, they distanced themselves from me. There were only a few people who continued to communicate with me, and they treated me as if I were toxic, as if my drama could be infectious. While we were having dinner together one evening, my father made the statement, "I just don't understand why you couldn't be happy with someone who treated you well." Donovan gave off the impression of being a decent individual. He was respectful, he had his life in order, and he eagerly desired to construct something with you. How come that wasn't sufficient? When I tried to convey that it wasn't about whether or not he was a good guy, I was unsuccessful. Rather than only going through the rituals, it was about the chemistry, the passion, and the sensation that someone genuinely wanted to be with you, rather than simply going through the processes. However, the more I spoke, the more I was able to observe the dissatisfaction that was present in his eyes. He whispered in a low voice, "Perhaps the issue is not with them. It is be that the issue is that you are unable to learn how to be joyful. There was a part of me that questioned whether or not he was correct, and that stung more than anything else that anyone else had said. For the sake of my addiction to drama, have I ruined something that may have been good? Is it possible that I mistook my enthusiasm for turmoil and my instability for excitement?" However, I would then recall how uninteresting my time with Donovan had been, as well as how much work it had required of me to pretend that I was content with his interpretation of love. And I would become enraged once more. Why should I be forced to make do with someone who felt more like a roommate than a boyfriend? Who is this person? For what reason was it regarded irrational to desire someone to fight for me, to feel jealous of me, or to demonstrate some true emotion? What is the most terrible aspect? One and all were correct. But I didn't learn from it. Rather, I only became more angry as a result. The fact that Donovan was content with another person was not justifiable. Without any repercussions, Tristan did not deserve to carry on with his life. You mean to judge me, all those people? What it was like to want someone to fight for you, to demonstrate that they cared enough to get upset, was something that they had never experienced. And now I am back where I started, but this time I am older and I have a reputation that follows me everywhere I go. Is that the truth? No longer do I care about it. Every person is free to think whatever they choose. At least I am aware of what I want from a romantic union, in contrast to all of these individuals who are content with uninteresting and predictable partnerships. That is fine with me if that makes me the antagonist in their story. Instead of pretending to be someone I am not in order to make other people feel more at ease, I would much prefer be alone myself. All of them are free to go to hell. That much is true. As soon as things started to get nasty, all of my so-called pals turned their backs on me, including Donovan with his perfect little fiancé, Tristan with his new toy, and everyone else. Not a single one of them has any idea what genuine passion looks like or what it is to genuinely fight for anything, rather than simply giving up when things get difficult. Every single one of them is a coward, and I would be better off without any of them. When I am out and about in the city or on social media, I occasionally come across them living their safe little lives with their well-crafted relationships. When Donovan and Sarah posted images of their anniversary, they appeared to be very satisfied with themselves and their ability to communicate effectively. As a couple, Tristan and his girlfriend like going on vacations together and playing house. Every single one of my former friends is getting engaged to guys who most likely sought for permission before switching the station on the television. They have the mistaken belief that they are being victorious. The only thing they are doing is surviving, and they are content with less because they are too afraid to demand more. They have managed to persuade themselves that drama is synonymous with disorder, and that if you seek intensity, it indicates that you are broken. However, I am more knowledgeable. The sensation of having someone look at you as if you are the only person in the room is something that I am familiar with. Due to the fact that the relationship is important, I am familiar with the experience of having disagreements that matter. On the other hand, I am familiar with the sensation of experiencing something genuine, as opposed to merely going through the motions of what a relationship is meant to look like. So it's possible that I'm by myself now, perhaps. I have a reputation for being the crazy ex-girlfriend who is incapable of dealing with a positive situation. Perhaps everyone believes that I am the source of the problem, but at least I am not deceiving myself about what it is that I desire. At least I am not pretending that I'm content with small pieces of food when I really ought to be eating the entire meal. They are able to maintain their monotonous and routine interactions. It is possible for them to continue with their communication, seminars, their therapy sessions, and their social media posts that are specifically color coordinated. Rather than merely keeping me warm, I will be waiting over here for something that is genuine. Something that genuinely ignites my spirit rather than just keeping me comfortable. And if that means that I will be alone myself for the rest of my life, then so be it. Instead than wasting another minute pretending that poor love is better than no love at all, I would rather be by myself. Instead of being the victim in my own story, I would much rather be the antagonist in theirs.